if you are part of the university, you do have access to the Adobe stock that the university has. And here, if you take a look at it, it has tons of different assets and things that you are welcome to download. We have photos, illustrations, vectors, all the way to 3D, as well as templates, which is what we're going to be sort of playing with today. Now, as a member of the university, you guys have access to unlimited downloads as far as 2D assets. So that's drawings, illustrations, vectors, things along those lines. There are also a variety of templates that we have already licensed for the university here. So one of the big things is, because we all share a federated license together, if someone goes ahead and asks for something, so if you go into some of these, for example, audio or video, for example, some of these assets do require a payment in the form of credits. That doesn't mean that you will be spending your own money on those, especially if you are a student. We do have a request form on our webpage that you can go ahead and send us a request, or you can send us an email at adobecc@arizona.edu. Let me throw that in there. And we will go ahead and we can license those assets for you. And the thing that's great about that is if we license it for one person, that means everybody else on campus then has access to that asset as well. So we do tend to try and pick the things that are the most important and the most universal that we can use. But we do have quite a few credits you can see for us to spend this semester, or well, I guess it's this year, it's through February. But you are welcome to go ahead and take a look. Today, we are going to talk about templates in particular. And in here, we can go ahead and search for anything we want. And there are lots of different things. Alex may want to jump in on the chat there. I believe you can, from what I understand. He may be able to clarify a little bit further. If we go ahead and real quick, we're just going to keep getting started here. If I go ahead and search for something in here, let's say I want to do a magazine or whatever, let's put a magazine spread. I can go ahead and search for these. And it's going to give us a very long list of things. Let's see. Oh, it's just taking its sweet time. Sorry, the internet may not be working as quickly as I'd hoped today. And these are tons of different templates that are already pre-built for us. Now, if I scroll down, you can see this seems to go on and on. And once you hit the bottom, it'll tell you there is over 100 pages at least of basic templates that you can use. Now, when you look at templates, you can tell what they relate to right here underneath. PSDT, anything that has the T at the end of it is going to be a template model. So PSD is going to be a Photoshop. INDT is going to be an InDesign. And I believe there also is a few Adobe Illustrator templates in here as well. But today we're going to be specifically looking at InDesign templates. And if you went ahead and downloaded the assets in that asset folder, you will have access. I believe I included the template that I used today. And the thing that's important to remember is when I'm looking at these templates, when I download them and actually open them up, they do not come in with all those pictures. The pictures are there to just simply show us what spaces are assigned to what. So for example, if a photograph's going to go here, obviously the intention is that you'll be replacing it with whatever content that you want to be using to do that. So if I go ahead and I have my folder right here of my downloads, this one we actually don't need, let me get rid of that. Right here is the InDesign template that I want to use. And if I go ahead and even just double click on it, it would automatically launch. But just to show you before we get to that point, if I launch my InDesign and you've never used it before, right here under recent, you're not going to have anything. I do want to point out over here, we do have our new file. We can open any existing files, or if someone sends something to us, we can find it by clicking open and then navigating to it. We also have, this is our homepage, we also have a Learn tab. And if I click on Learn, this will offer a variety of other little tutorials that you're welcome to follow along that Adobe has installed in all of their apps. So any application, if you launch it on their homepage here, you will have a Learn tab that will give you a bunch of different things to teach you the fundamentals of that program and help walk you through the workspace and things along those lines. Now, for example, we're just going to go ahead, and if you want, you're welcome to double click, open that template. And when it opens, we get a user interface that looks like this. Mine will not have layers open, probably. And what we have here is going to be the canvas that we work on. So right here, you can see is this white space. Now, depending on how many pages a template has, it will continue to scroll down. This one only has two different templates, two different pages. So it's more of almost like a spread. So this is our canvas, this area in the middle. Around it, we call this usually the paste board. Over here on the left-hand side, we have all of our tools, which you're going to notice there is not a ton of tools compared to some of the other applications, especially if you're familiar with Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, for example. There is a limited amount of things. And I would like to think that InDesign is more of an organization sort of tool almost, rather than a, graphics generating program. That doesn't mean we can't create and make things in here, but obviously there are other programs that are better suited for that particular ability. Now, up here at the top, this is our open tab. So this is our open document. And if you have more than one document open at a time, you will have more of these tabs as they run across. Obviously, some of us that are working in here all the time, this thing is completely full. We do also have right here at the upper corner, obviously right here is our program menu. So here's where we'll be able to find lots of different palettes and other windows that we may be using, or panels, especially right here under the window panel. We'll be using that a little bit later on. Over here on the right-hand side, mine is kind of detached from my element right now. We do have a couple different things. We have a properties panel, which gives us information basically about our document, perhaps the size of it. It also will change according to what we have selected. So if I click on something, we do get other options that will pop up as we work. We also have a pages panel, and this is super important. So this will list all of the pages that are a part of our document right here. So if we have, 100 pages and we're doing an entire book, you're going to have a list of all those pages in here. Now, this is another thing that we'll talk about here, and they call it a master or a parent page. And we'll talk about that because there are some templates that come in, and I did some work with the Norton School recently, and they ran into an issue where they had some elements they couldn't figure out how to get rid of based on normal processes. And that has something to do with this page, and we'll talk about that once we get a little bit further along. The other tab that we have up here is our CC library, and our libraries is basically where we have access to content that we've created across the Adobe Creative Cloud. So for example, if I had generated perhaps logos or something else, you can see here's a lot of different libraries that are available to us. I have a personal library, the university library. And so there's a variety of things we can do, and we can store images or graphics or whatever it may be in here. And in any Adobe app, you will have your CC libraries panel. And in there, you can pull out content that you created in other applications and then apply it into these new ones as well. So that's just something to be aware of. For now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stay on the Pages panel. And you can see if I double click, it will take me to that page just so I can navigate around. So the first thing we want to go ahead and do is, like we said, when we import a document, for in this case, we opened our template. When we open it, obviously, like we said, there is no photographs. All of our photographs are gone. So all we're left with are these squares. And these squares serve as both shapes, and they can also be used as picture frames. So unlike a lot of other things or programs, you can actually drop images into here. And we have a couple different tools to do that. If we look in our tools panel, we have two different objects. One of these, and these are the ones that get confusing, but this is rectangle frame tool. And right here, we have another rectangle tool. This one is usually meant when we want to create, for example, a template like this, and we want to remember that this is where someone is going to be dropping an image. We can use this. Now, that doesn't mean I'm only limited to using this tool to create frames. In this case, we have an existing frame. We can actually go ahead and add things to these without actually sort of importing them per se. We can go ahead, and if you go to those assets that I've gone ahead and downloaded, we do have a bunch of photos, and these are all complimentary of Alex. I don't know if he's aware that I did this. We used them for something else, and I just sort of repurposed this. This is a collection of cacti. Again, if you have any questions about them, please direct those to Alex. I do not know much about this. But for example, yeah, they are nice plants. What I'm going to go ahead and do though is I can go ahead and use one of my selection arrows, and I have a couple different ways to use these. I have a regular selection arrow, And this allows me to move frames as a whole. Now, objects and things that are created in Adobe InDesign, specifically all of these boxes, the type and everything else are what we consider vector, which means they are composed of anchors and paths. So you could actually do some of your creation in Adobe Illustrator, which is a vector-based program, and import some of those things if that makes your life easier, if you're more familiar. But we also have the ability to use direct select, which allows us to manipulate specific elements and different things as well. So we can distort things in various ways. But in this case, we're going to use the regular selection arrow since we're only going to be editing this template. And I'll show you how to do some other things here in just a moment. But it also allows me to go ahead and select my object. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select this bigger frame, and this is going to be my larger photo. Once I've done that, I can go ahead and if I open in my Finder right here, here are my images. One of the great things I love about InDesign compared to other programs is I can simply drag and drop images. I don't need to go ahead and necessarily import them. I could say I want to use this photo right here. I can click and drag directly over this box and let go, and it is going to place that object into this frame. Now, one of the more confusing things is I have two different ways to work with this object now that I've placed an image. Once I've done this, I have the frame itself, which if I click on here, you can see I have these squares at all the corners and in the middles. These are called this is called a bounding box. So this allows me to change the size of this object. So I can scale it if I want it to be a different size. But notice the image and size does not change when I change the size of the frame. If I want to edit the actual image inside of the frame, for example, scale it, rotate it, or do any other feature, if I go to the middle right here, you notice this turns into a hand, my cursor, this circle in the middle, if I click on it, all of a sudden you're going to see a different bounding box appear. And this bounding box extends outside of the actual frame. This is going to be the actual image itself. So if I click and grab my bounding box, one thing I want to notice is if I click and drag like this, notice that it changes in any shape as far as a rectangle as I want, but notice what happens to my photographs. And this is basically when we change the scale of something unproportionally. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. You can use Command or Control Z, depending on if you're a Mac or a PC. If I want to scale proportionally, I'm going to grab my bounding box and I will hold down the Shift key, and that will allow me to scale this object proportionally. So notice I won't distort the actual image, which you see sometimes on a lot of different websites and things like that. If someone fails to scale proportionally, that's what will happen as we get those smashed graphics. So we've gone ahead, we've added an image, and notice this brown bounding box. If I want to get rid of this and be able to work with my actual image, I'm simply going to go ahead and click outside of it. And if I click back on the image, I'm back to actually editing the frame itself. So here we go. We have our first image added. And at any point, if we're unhappy with it, we could simply go ahead. We'll do it in a minute. We can actually just drag in a new image if we are wanting to get rid of this one. One of the other things that's great about it is it's similar if you've used Adobe Express, which I think a lot of people have. Great thing about templates is all of the elements are editable. So we can simply go in and change anything we feel like. So for example, we've added a photo. Let's also say we want to add some more photos. Maybe we don't have enough photos. We can add one more here, perhaps. Let's just say we want to drag and drop something. So let's go drag and drop. We have added a new image. I'm going to make sure. Now notice this one, I only have the very middle of the photograph. I only got this little very middle piece. If I want to do that, I could simply click on the circle in the middle and then adjust my bounding box. There's also another feature. If I go ahead and I right click in here, I can go to fitting, and right here I can say I want to fit the content proportionally, or I could fill the frame proportionally. So depending on what I want it to do, if I wanted to fill the frame, I could simply go ahead and click here, and it's going to automatically fill that frame with my image. Now, again, I can still change this by simply clicking and dragging while holding the Shift key, my bounding box. I can also use my arrow keys to maneuver it in there so it fits a little better, perhaps. So we have that fit in there. If you're uncomfortable or you're struggling with that, you can always right-click and select the fitting, and then go ahead and adjust how it fits to that frame. But for example, we're not just limited to using what the content already has. We can go ahead and actually create new spaces for photographs. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in, which I just did. It's the same in pretty much all of the Adobe apps. If you use Command or Control plus or minus will allow you to zoom in or out on my image. And that allows me to sort of make easier use of navigating my space. So what I can do now is if I want to go ahead and add more images, let's say we want to add 3 more images. We're going to add 3 little squares right here. I can go over to my tool panel. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to select my rectangle frame tool. And again, I'm going to click and drag. Now, again, clicking and dragging allows me to make any size, shape, rectangle. If I want to make perfect squares, and this goes for making circles as well, if I hold the Shift key, it allows me to only make perfect squares and circles depending on the selection. If I click and hold over here, you can see I have the rectangle tool, I have the ellipse tool, as well as the polygon. So I can create a variety of different things. So I've gone ahead, I've created one. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to give it a border so I can see it. And right here, I have 2 boxes. I have a fill color and I have what is called a stroke color. So any object can have a fill and a stroke. Now, in order to add colors, I could go in here and double click to open my color picker. I also have the ability, I'm going to go up here to Window, and we're going to go ahead and open my color swatches. And to do that, I'm going to go to Window. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to select color, and I'm going to go over here and select the swatches panel. You can see right here, I can also use the hotkey F6, and that will, or 5, sorry, F5. Color will be 6, F5, and that'll open my swatches panel. And so this is a list of all of the colors that are in my document. And I'm opening this simply because if I do create something else, I can add new swatches here if I like. I can also go ahead and use existing swatches. So for my fill, if I was to click on this, notice it'll fill my object that color. If I go over here and I select the stroke, I can go ahead and select a stroke color, and you can see it adds those to my objects. Now, I've created one frame. I'm going to go ahead and I can create 2 more, and I can do that by doing edit copy, edit paste. So Command or Control C right here, you can see, or Command or Control V, depending on your type of computer. Another thing you can also do is hold down the Alt or Option key while selecting that object and dragging, and that will create a duplicate. Now, one thing I do want to point out is notice I get these here. Let me go back a step. Notice as I click and drag this, for example, sorry, my computer is fighting with me. I get these green lines that appear. These are called smart guides, and their whole purpose is to help us align our elements so they fit nice. And I do have access to alignment tools, which I can show you in a little bit. But this is going to help you do that without necessarily needing to use alignment tools to do that. So what we've gone ahead and done is we've created 3 new frames. What I can do is if I have lots of images that need to be dropped in at once, and one of the great examples is we used to work at a high school, and this is the program they used to use to create the yearbook. So if you had to drop in lots of images of people, for example, photographs in that case, I could have a page that's just filled with these frames. And what I can go ahead and do is I could go over here and say, I want to pick 3 different images. Let's say we want to pick these 3. I could click and drag them to this first box. And notice as I hover, I get a picture of the first image, and I actually see in there, sorry, it doesn't like when we're on Zoom, but you'll be able to see how many images you have attached. And I can say in this frame, I'm going to click once, it'll add the first one, add the second one, and add the third one. And then just like we did before, I can simply go down here, right click on the image and say fitting, and I'm going to say fit frame proportionally, fit frame proportionally. Sorry, I have to select it first. And it'll go ahead and add those images for me. So that's how we can add new frames. Now, we're not simply bound to a square frame. We had over here, you can see there's a couple different ones. So let's say, for example, I want to use the ellipse tool. I could go ahead and also create a frame that's an ellipse. In this case, I'm also going to show you how to use one of the other tools that's pretty neat in here. So I'm going to create a new frame. I'm going to give it a fill and a stroke, so that way we can see my frame. I I'm going to go ahead and add it right here for now. And in that frame, we'll go ahead and we'll add, let's see, this one. Fit proportionally. So I have this cool little thing. Now, what I can do with these things, whoops, sorry, I actually moved the graphic itself. We're going to save this for later, but I just wanted to show that you have different frames. You can also create custom graphics, like custom elements. So for example, if I didn't want to have a perfect shaped frame, I could go in here. You have the ability to create polygons. We also have in here the pen tool. And with the pen tool, I can create other elements. I'm just going to do this for the sake of showing you. You don't need to copy it, but just so you are aware, I could go ahead and create a frame like such, and then add an image to that frame. So I don't have to have standard frames or standard images. I can create custom elements and then actually fit photographs to them as well. So I'm not limited to just what you see as far as frames. I can create any sort of element I like. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll say the same thing just to show you we can fit it proportionally. So again, you can create any sort of element you could think of and then add an image to it, which is super nice because a lot of other programs, we have to do some clipping masks and things like that. So that's how we can add and edit photographs in a template. One of the other things we want to do is obviously we want to be able to change the type in here. And there's a couple different ways. And the first one is obviously all of these are editable. So if I double click in here enough times, I can highlight an entire word in this case, and we could change it to whatever we want. I can't spell, so please forgive me. I definitely am designerly. Okay, so doing that, I can go ahead and edit it. Once I've done that, if I go to my properties panel, for example, with this object selected, I could go ahead, I'm going to select my type, and in my properties panel, I have the ability to edit that type in a variety of different ways. I have all of my normal alignment tools that you would expect. I also have right here in the character category, here are my libraries of fonts. And if I click and drag over these, I don't even need to click actually. Once I click on it and drag down over them, it'll automatically display on my screen what each font will look like in my actual graphic. So for example, if I see something I like, I could go ahead and select it. And also right here, we do have the ability to change if it has other settings. For example, if I have different weights and then also like if I have italics, etc., I will have that option right here. Right here is my font size. I can change it so it fits more proportionally. I also have the ability to go ahead and say I could fill this with whatever color I want. So in this case, I have it as white, but if I wanted to pick a different color, I could go ahead. I'm going to select it, select my fill, and I can go ahead then and sort of select from any category here that I would like as far as what color. Now, if I go ahead, let me do that one more time so you can see, I have it selected. If I go up here, this is where I can access my color picker and I can pick custom colors. So for example, let's pick a custom color. So I'm going to go ahead, double click on it. It'll open my color picker. Now we're in an RGB display. Now, I find this a little bit harder to navigate. I don't know about everybody else. I'm definitely more used to a CMYK platform. So to do that, if I go over here and click on the H, it will access that HSB color profile. And I have obviously light and dark, and then I have my pure color up here, and I can pick a custom color. Now, I could pick a color, but let's say, for example, maybe I want to go ahead and I want to fill behind it with one of these colors from my photograph. I could go down here and I could either put in a hex code or I could grab this eyedropper. If I click and hold, I should. Oh, it's not going to let me do it now. Hang on. After all that, I ruined it. Why won't you let me color pick? Oh. We'll just do it. Hang on. Now my computer's freezing. There we go. Let's go over here and I'll use my. Whoa. Hang on. My InDesign just crashed. Give me a moment. Reopen. Struggle one for today. Okay, so let's try this again. I'm going to bring back over all of my elements. Okay, So here's my frame. Let's go ahead. I'm going to select the eyedropper tool. And if I go over here, I could pick one of these other colors. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me a variety of colors. So it's basically creating a color palette from my image. And you'll notice that's because it has all these little squares underneath. So if I was to go ahead and click and hold, I could say, I just want one color. I want to just have a regular eyedropper tool. I could go in here and click, and that will select that color. You can see it's right here in my fill box. So if I have my swatches open, I can now click and drag and drop this into my palette, and it will save that color for me. So I could go ahead and use that color at this point. So let's go ahead and let's jump back to where we were. I'm going to select this. I'm going to say I want it to be orange. And I could give it that orange color. Now, that's one way we can edit our type. The other thing is a lot of time we come in wanting to change large blocks of type. And I think that's what most people are using InDesign for, is we are going to go ahead and we want to be able to change out all of this. Now, sometimes it's obviously written beforehand. So sometimes we have that information handy. And in that asset folder that I shared with you, you will have something that says sample text. And if I click on preview, you can see here is something I believe that was written. I think we just used ChatGPT real quick to create something, so we have some information that wasn't the lorem ipsum, which you can actually in place put that sort of placeholder text. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this, but we're not actually going to retype all of it. So I've gone ahead and just saved this as a regular Word document. Down here in my document, I have, this is the lorem ipsum sort of type. That's just a placeholder to show you what it looks like with type. In order to replace it all, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go in here, I'm going to double click until I select all my type. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. I'm in this case going to take my selection tool so I can see my bounding box now where my type is. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to click and drag my type. So this is my docx file, so just my document. Drag and drop it. And for one reason or another, it tends to place in white. So I'm going to go ahead and double click, and I'm going to select gray text color. So now all of my text is now gray, and you'll notice what it did is it went ahead and it started adding this first section of all my type. Now, one of the big things is a lot of people like to go in and they're like, okay, well, it stops at this point. Now I need to go copy my text and then paste it into the next box. One of the coolest things about InDesign is I don't need to do that. In this case, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to delete all this type. I'm going to take my selection tool. I'm going to go back up to this box, and you see this little corner where it's got a red square with a red plus in it. That means that there is additional content that did not fit this frame. And that means I could click and drag to add more space. But a lot of times when we're creating, whether it be a flyer or a magazine or anything like that, we tend to have columns, or we have lots of spaces where it would fit in other places. So in this case, I could go ahead and click on that box, and you can see it gives me a little preview and says, hey, I got type. We emptied all the type that was in this box. If I click down here in this, it's going to pick right up where this left off, and it'll add the rest of my content. And they call this threading my text. And I could do the same thing. I could go down here, delete it, take my selection tool. I'm going to go up here, grab the remaining text, come down, and it'll continue to do that. And I can string it throughout my document, just from one thing to the next. So just to show, let's see how far we actually get. I'm not sure. Oh, we keep going. Keep going, delete. All right. We'll stop after this, I promise. No, all right, I take it back. We only got one box left. Let me just finish. The OCD is taking over. There we go. We'll stop there. So just for the sake of showing, that's how we can string all of this type. And like I said, we don't have to retype it. We don't have to cut and paste anything. We can simply string it throughout my document as I go along. Another cool thing is when we do have images, for example, we have this graphic right here that we created earlier. If I wanted to put this somewhere and I wanted to be able to see it, we can actually go ahead right here on the right-hand side. In our properties panel, you'll be able to see right here, text wrap. I can click on this and it'll automatically acknowledge that there is an object here, and I can use these right here to increase the space around that object, so it will automatically warp, depending on what I do, the rest of my type, so it fits around my images, so I can keep it nice and neat. Now, one of the other things, and this is something that we tend to run into, like right now, this is right here, for example, I'm going to go ahead. Sometimes you download a template, and this is what we were talking about earlier. If I go to my pages, I'm going to go ahead and place this in such a way that it can't be really moved. I'm going to put it up here, and let's say we had it right there. So now if I go back into my content, notice when I get a document that has something like this and you can't seem to move it, no matter what you do, I can't select where it says lorem example. Well, I guess it's supposed to be lorem example. I'm not really sure. I can't access it. If I have something that I want to be in the same place on all of my documents. So for example, I want it to be on the same in every page. You'll see it here. It is again. Here, we'll get rid of this one so we can make it clear. If I want something to appear on every page, like maybe it is a web address, maybe it is the title of a document. And sometimes in the templates, they're already there. There's an example. To get to those, one thing you want to do is you're going to go up here to where it says, this case, it says a master. I'm going to go ahead and double click on it. And notice there's nothing else on my page. This is just sort of the preset for my document saying, I want to have this here. And if I go in and if I wanted to change it, for example, we could say this, let's just change this into InDesign demo. Oops, kind of a big gap there. We don't want that. InDesign demo, if I change it in the master. Now, one thing is a lot of people are like, how do I get back? Easily enough, we just go down to our page and double click. Notice it changes what I wrote. And notice it has that plus symbol. That just means what I typed is actually longer than my actual word box. So if I move that, let's go back. Now you can see InDesignDemo.com, and it's going to appear on every page in the same spot. So if I want to be able to edit that or add something, I can go ahead and do that right there within this master page. And if I want to get rid of it, I just go to the master page and go ahead and press delete. And then if I click on here, you'll notice it removes it from my page. So that's how we can add any extra element that we want to make sure appears everywhere. And we don't have to want to do it on each page individually. So as far as editing a document, we've gone ahead, we've shown you how to take an existing template, we've added new photos, we've added new frames and placed multiple photos at once. We've gone ahead and changed type, some colors. We've gone ahead and we've also strung our type from an existing Word document. What we can do now is at this point, we would probably want to go ahead and be able to save it. And to do that, we can go up here to File, and if we go File, Save As, right here, you're going to be able to see we have three different options. We have a document, a template, or a InDesign CS4 or later. So these are sort of like legacy files. In this case, more often than not, we're going to save this as a document, unless you're creating a template that you want to share with somebody else. So every time you create a template, when you go File, Save As, you're not saving over the template anymore. It's asking you to rename it as a new document. So whenever you create a template, it's something that I could use over and over again. For example, if I was doing it for a class and I had a bunch of students and I was going to share it with them, I would create a template and share that template. So every time they use it, they'd be asked to save it as a new document, and it'll always be there. In this case, we can save it as a document. Any of these can be opened up and edited later on. So the File Save As option will allow us to do that. So if I save this as an InDesign template, we're going to say, where do I want to save it? In this case, we could go ahead and save it as, let's just go Documents. I have a weird folder called Tests for Termination. We'll save it there. So it now saved that document. Now, I can't open an InDesign document, for example, on my phone. If I wanted to share it and someone be able to look at it or share it to someone that doesn't have InDesign, I can go ahead and export it. And to do that, I can go File, Export. And when I do that, I have right here a variety of different options. Now these, what will happen is it is going to go ahead and flatten my image. And that means I can't go back and open this up and make any edits. I just have a flat version of this document. So depending on what I want to use it for, does it have the option to save in the cloud? You know, that is a good question. Not sure. It probably does. Let me look here in a second. Alex, you might want to step in. But here is where I would send something like if I wanted to export, this is a document I could send to someone else, and they would be able to open it up and look at it with or without. Let's go ahead and we'll exit this. So we could say, I'm going to save this as a JPEG. Let's go down to documents, scroll down. We'll do the same thing, test returns and save here. And it's going to say, what do I want to export? I can choose. Maybe I don't want to use all the pages. Maybe I only want page 1. I could go ahead and select a range, or I could leave it as all. And then there's a lot of other things. If I want to change the image quality, I could change my resolution. So I could have much nicer images. I could change this all the way up to 300. You could obviously go higher. I think 300 is probably as high as you need to go. If it's like a printed standard page, would be more than sufficient. And then obviously we can go ahead and when we're done, click export, and that will save a JPEG version of what I just did. Now, I'm trying to see, for some reason, I don't have the rest of my page. Let's see. So that's how you can save as editable and then as one we would intend to export. Now, as far as cloud is in beta. Thank you, Alex, for looking into that. I was going to say more often than not, a lot of the new features they're going to go ahead and have, you'll see many of the other Adobe apps, and I'm assuming eventually you'll see the same thing here in InDesign as a share option, and that share option will eventually be allowed to create a URL that you can share with another person or a variety of people, and they can make comments and edits, as well as being able to save it directly to your cloud. So that'll be something that's probably in the works if it's not already. Beyond that, that is our introduction to using Adobe InDesign.